You may have heard this all the time. I never break a sweat. Or, I'm not really working out until I get a good sweat going. Or tragically, wow, you stink. Well, there is science actually backing these statements and how our bodies produce sweat. But what is very interesting is what sweating does not do for us. In particular, how does sweating influence the way we are developing our physiques? Is it a sign of a good workout, or is it smoke and mirrors? This video will discuss exactly what is happening when we sweat, what it does with respect to building muscle, and what our best strategies are. All right, let's go. The sweat we are most interested in is the thermoregulatory type. It's the one that cools us down and the one we know and love from an intense workout or game. But it's important to know what is happening with sweat overall. Our guy who, quote, never breaks a sweat is not sweating in a thermoregulatory cool-down kind of way. Rather, that sweating is triggered by emotions. Interestingly, it's the same sweat gland at work, but our nervous system and brain are using a completely different trigger. The trigger is giving that big public speech, or asking someone out on a date, or perhaps talking with a person of authority. Whatever the case, your brain sends a signal to produce sweat as an emotional response. This signal triggers the glands in your feet, armpits, and hands. This is literally the sweaty palm syndrome when you get nervous. Now, our other guy who rudely said, "we stink," is referring to a completely different sweat gland in our body. This gland produces a much different fluid that is thicker than what we would typically see when we're breaking a sweat and is done underneath the skin. This sweat attaches to the hair follicle and then travels up the hair to the surface of the skin. Our rude friend is reacting not to the sweat because it's actually odorless. Rather, the sweat, when it reacts to the bacteria on our skin, is what produces the body odor, or the dreaded BO. One interesting fact is that this is the same sweat gland that produces pheromones in our body. This is why we can find ourselves attracted to the odor of another person. One person will think the odor stinks, while the other person will find it attractive. Mother Nature. Okay, so let's look at thermoregulatory sweat, the one that covers our body and cools us down. Interesting fact is that it's the same gland producing the sweat when we are emotional, but instead of starting with the feet and palms, sweating to cool down starts in the forehead, with the palms and feet last. Test it. It's really bizarre when you see the difference. So we're here to understand the cooling effect and how it relates to our physical development. So let's start with some surprising facts about what cool down sweating does not do. First, it does not unclog your skin pores. These are two completely different glands. It may seem like a good sweat is akin to a clean out of your skin, but that's actually not the case. In fact, the opposite is true. If you sweat from a good workout and do not clean your skin afterward, the sweat on the surface can carry bacteria or debris that could lodge and dry in your skin pores, thus leading to irritation and perhaps bumps. Second, sweating does not actually improve mood. It's often identified as a causal factor in feeling good after a workout or after some heat therapy like a sauna. But it's not the sweating that is doing it, it's the release of the feel-good endorphins triggered by the exercise or heating of your core. Sweating is just a reaction, not the cause. You feel good, but it's not from the sweating. The last misconception is that a good sweat is an indicator of a good, hard workout. Maybe, but it's not that accurate. There is much more at play when considering whether a workout was effective or not. One thing is that your physical condition plays a part in the amount of sweating you do. The more fit you are, the more sweat you produce, and the quicker you begin to produce that sweat. If you're just starting out on your health journey and say you have some pounds to lose, you may not sweat as much as someone in better shape, or even yourself in better shape. But your workout could be the best you could possibly do. It's relative to your position. A better indicator of a good workout will be fatigue, lifting to failure, and recovery time. These can all be perfect for you, and you didn't even sweat at all. So what about the positive aspects of thermal cooling sweat? Well, right off the bat is what cooling actually does for you. Certain studies have shown that it does have a direct impact on your physical performance abilities, but much more so in the area of cardio rather than muscle growth. For instance, the longer you are working out in an aerobic way, breathing heavily, the more sweating contributes to your ability to continue with solid performance. This is related to your VO2 max and how it lowers during long periods of cardio. Sweating steps in to cool down your body in an effort to keep VO2 at its required levels. Here's the great part. Sweating for thermal cooling does not markedly impact muscle strength if our sweating is kept below about 5% of total fluid loss. This is well within the range of a typical workout for most people. A sedentary person, for instance, will produce about a cup of sweat per day. Someone in a very intense environment like putting out a forest fire or someone running a marathon can produce almost 2.5 gallons of sweat a day. That's actually a little bit gross to visualize, but the point is that it takes a lot of sweating in extreme environments to produce the level of sweating that will impact muscle strength and development. We simply do not sweat like firefighters or marathon runners when we lift weights. We sweat, but not enough to be detrimental. Further, thermoregulatory sweating is very, very efficient. Research shows that it's 10 times more efficient at cooling than your body is at producing heat. So as we lift weights, the cooling of our body is much more effective than the heating through the exercises. We must be in much more extreme environments to see potential negative effects. However, one thing we must always consider is dehydration and electrolyte loss. Dehydration is usually not an issue for most of us working out, as we tend to keep water next to us or have a water bottle on the ready. If you're not doing this, do it. Keep water at your side. But the thermo-cooling sweat does remove electrolytes as well as some waste products. We know this intuitively as sweat has this salty taste. So along with urea, uric acid, and ammonia, the sweat for cooling eliminates salt from our bodies. Salt, of course, is one of the most crucial electrolytes for physical development, as well as a host of other critical bodily functions. So our aim is to replenish 2 items here, water and salt. Water is obvious, but salt is a little bit more subtle. So should we be guzzling a salty and sugary sports drink on the market? Absolutely not. As we have shown in other videos, the bad outweighs the good, but we do need to replace the essential electrolytes. The focus is on sodium, of course, but we also need potassium and magnesium. This is very easy to do by simply adding it to a glass of water. But if the idea of drinking salt water is important to you, you can always just add salt to your food. Same with potassium and magnesium. They both come in forms that won't turn your stomach, and while there are some good supplements for electrolyte replacement, they're not really needed. We have salt, and we can find potassium and magnesium in other consumable foods. One great tip: find really good salt. You want the pink kind, the ones found in salt mines and ancient seas. They will be unprocessed and full of great peripheral minerals. Finally, a word about muscle cramps. There's almost nothing as debilitating as a cramp. We grimace immediately at the start of one and can barely do anything else until it's gone. Take a look at soccer or football players when they get a calf cramp. They are so incapacitated that they lay down on their backs and wait for a teammate to help them. Sometimes even the refs are sympathetic enough to help push against the player's cramp to help them out. But research is ultimately inconclusive on whether dehydration electrolyte loss is the actual cause of a muscle cramp. But it's fairly clear from most anecdotal accounts that dehydration and electrolyte loss contributes in some manner. Listen to people talk about their experience when they eliminate processed food and instead focus on animal products. A lot get muscle cramps quite quickly. This is usually due to the electrolyte loss and the massive amounts of salt and sugar in the processed foods that were eliminated. So if you're eating right, make sure you salt that food. Just don't overdo it. So get that sweat on. Don't worry about muscle loss or negative impact on your gains, but do focus on getting those electrolytes. Check out this video for more hints and strategies on ultimate male fitness, and we'll see you next time.